agree.
Be done with it.
I agree.
So yeah, my frustration.
Okay, everyone all set? We're ready to go. I'll call the Londonderry Planning Board meeting to order for December 8th, 2010. And I just want to point out for everyone's information, in case we have an emergency, need to evacuate, that this room has two exits. They're at the front and the back on the right-hand side of the audience. We do need to evacuate. We actually go through the exit closest to you, move outside, and move away from the building. And tonight, don't forget to bring your jacket if we have to do. Don't come back in until everyone, our fire department has instructed everyone to do so. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise. We'll pledge allegiance to the American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Laura. Okay, our meeting is divided into two parts. First part is administrative board work, where we get our business done, and the second part of the meeting, and this being the second Wednesday of the month, we have our workshops, conceptual discussions, and public hearings. Let's see, Chris Davies is away on business, so I'm going to appoint Dana to vote for Chris. And I haven't seen Mary yet, so I'll appoint Scott to vote for Mary. We've got a quorum. And we're ready to go. First thing is Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission alternate recommendations. Let's see, it was probably about 2 months ago, Margot had sent me an email that the terms had expired, that they had a one-year term. Southern New Hampshire Commission bylaws does not specify the term for alternates, and I guess that's pretty much set by us as the planning board makes the recommendation to the town council for appointments. Also, Linda Moore, who's the office manager up there, had sent me the attendance records and everything for us to go through, because according to the bylaws also, I guess the commission is supposed to review them, and if there's any absenteeism, they are supposed to notify the appointing board or so forth. And what the bylaws basically say in regards to absenteeism, that is, if you're not there, if you have not been excused, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings, that's when a letter goes out. I really haven't got a letter until this came through, I think about several weeks ago. And the other thing is, if you miss more than 40% of the meetings, or absent 40% of the meetings during the year, that also generates a letter. And what I want to point out for the board is the attendance of the 2 alternates. Out of the past 27 meetings, Deb Levins has been absent only once, and Deb Paul, who is the other alternate, has been absent 18 times. And I know when this board does do interview for candidates, one of the questions that someone always asks is about commitment and the ability to attend meetings. So I want the board to weigh that as we make our recommendations to the town council. And I've passed out the attendance sheet for everyone to review. And I noticed Linda had made a little overlap of 3 months, which I made the adjustment. And also the November meeting minutes are in the read file to see who was there, who wasn't there.
Mr. Chairman, question, how many alternates are we required to have?
You're not required to have any. It's an option of the, probably the recommending board to the appointing board. Some towns do, some towns don't. We had, I think when we're looking for volunteers for one position, I think we had a number of people volunteer, and it's up to us to, you can't have any more alternates than you do members, because in theory they're supposed to vote for a member that's not there.
So how many do we usually have, Mr. Chairman?
We have 3 members on the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. We can have, at our option, up to 3 alternates.
Do we, Mr. Chairman, do we want to continue with 2 alternates, or just drop back and have 1 alternate?
That's entirely up to the planning board as making a recommendation to the town council.
You know, I personally don't have any issue with the 2 alternates. I know the Pauls have had extenuating circumstances over the last couple of years in trying to maintain a small business. And I'm sure that that's, you know, led to some of the absenteeism. So, you know, I would be shocked if that's not what you came in here and said. And I think, you know, we have a hard time getting volunteers, period. So whenever somebody steps up, maybe, maybe things are better for them now. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It would, well, I think it's entirely up to the board, how they want to do it.
I agree with John. I would say, I'm fine with go ahead, continuing to recommend Deb and Deb Paul as the two alternates, and
Okay, I'll take a motion.
so moved.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
And a second by Lynn, and that is to make a recommendation to the town council for the appointment of Deb Levens and Deb Paul for a one-year term as alternates to the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Abstentions, chair votes affirmative. Motion carries, and that goes to the town council. Next, we have discussions with town staff. I'll start with Andre. Anything hot going on?
One thing to report. Last month, I attended a meeting sponsored by the DOT regarding tolling on EF Everett Turnpike, and specifically the airport access road. What they went over was a report that identified 10 different options as to tolling on EF Everett Turnpike. I know the town had already submitted a letter to DOT indicating that their displeasure at any tolling that will be on the Manchester Airport Access Road, but they are looking at all options with regard to tolling on the FE Everett Turnpike, and obviously to generate revenue. I think the top three options, one of the top options is providing tolls at the entrance and the off-ramps of the FE Everett the Manchester Airport Access Road. The other two options reside near the exit 1, exit 2 along FE Everett Turnpike in Nashua. Each one of them generate positive revenue, but of the top three alternative, the highest one, the one that yields the highest return is the Manchester Airport actual tolling. So right now they're in the listening mode, and I know they're going to be having other public hearings in January based on the input that they've heard, and hopefully the tolling issue will be decided. Hopefully the tolling will not be on the airport access road; it will be elsewhere.
Yes, I know through the whole process of that, I know we, as a town, emphasized we didn't want tolling on there. And it seems that when revenues are needed by a government body, they tend to look at every little thing they can get their hands on, my opinion. Maybe you get a politician here and you get money here, and all of a sudden, before you know it, they're right together. But it's something I think we should be vigilant, at least, maintain whatever letters we need to write, let us know.
Absolutely.
So
We're
that
paying
we
close
can keep
attention
that.
to this, very close attention.
Yes, yeah. Because what the state has to look at also is how much business they're gonna drive away and how much money they're gonna lose, from, in theory, they look at all these cars, but they're gonna drive some of them away with tolls.
That's true. And obviously for Londonderry, the Pittengill Road area is something that we've been advocating for the last decade, and with the potential of generating about 4 million square feet of commercial industrial development and 4,000 to 6,000 jobs. And a lot of those jobs will probably come from FE Everett Turnpike. Therefore, they pay a toll every day to go to work. It might hurt our efforts to generate businesses in that area. So
Yeah, well, we have more traffic on local roads.
Yeah.
Roads that the
that's the other offset.
local government has to maintain. Anything else?
No, almost said. Thank you.
Anything, John?
Nope.
Okay, Tim?
All set.
All set. Anything from the board?
Yeah, we had a discussion at the town council with regards to Crowell's Corner, and we didn't know the numbers, so, Tim, I know you met with these guys last Friday. Can you update the board on where that stands?
Sure.
And, because Representative Baldessaro said that he had had a discussion with our attorney, so maybe you can clarify.
We did meet with Mr. Paul, myself, John, and Richard Canuel from the Building Division on December 2nd. At that meeting, we basically went over the steps that would need to take place in order for Crowell's to come back to the planning board, in order for the board to consider a reinstatement of their site plan. The major outstanding issue has been for some time the completion of the site estimate. We were able to finish that and work with Mr. Paul to come up with the final numbers that were missing from that. So the total that we had developed for the site estimate for the site costs associated with the site plan was $66,814 and some change. Based on that, the restoration surety would need to be $16,000 to be posted with the town, and the inspection escrow would need to be $3,400. So we basically then outlined that in order for the board, based on the feedback we received from the board previously, that in order for the board to consider reinstatement, they would need to post those sureties and the escrow with the town, prepare a letter to the planning board requesting their reinstatement of their plan with the justification and a realistic commitment to complete the site work, and then the planning board would be able to consider the reinstatement request. The major outstanding unknown at this point in terms of the costs associated with Crowell's Corner to complete the project is primarily related to the improvements that may be needed inside the building itself. The building division has not been in to do any inspection. The fire division did do a cursory review. Mr. Paul did indicate he would schedule a time to have Richard Canuel, our building official, and the fire inspector walk through the building to develop a punch list so that estimate for the costs could be developed at that point. Lastly, I calculated the required impact fees that that Crowell's would have to pay in order to gain their certificate of occupancy. And we basically outlined that the issue of the occupancy of the facility right now is out of the town's hands, and unless it's overturned by a court decision or is stayed by the courts, we expect that there will be no occupancy of the building and structure until such time that all the site improvements are completed, inspected, and the CO is signed off on by town staff.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the board? Cole Melendi has resigned. I sent him an email, and he is a proud father of one son, and that's been keeping him busy. So he apologizes for the delay, and so we have a vacancy. We do have one person who Margot had sent me as part of the talent bank, and that will have to go through the town council for their vetting process and appointment. Okay, we'll get on to our main business here. We have 5 items. First item is a public hearing. This is a zoning ordinance amendment, and these are clarifications to the sign ordinance involving the temporary signs and the MUC sub-district requirements. And Tim, you can do a
Thank you, Mr.
presentation on
Chairman.
this.
I'll be brief. These are primarily corrective changes in nature. There are 2 proposed amendments. The first would be to Section 311-638 to indicate that only 1 temporary sign is permitted on a lot. And secondly, to correct an oversight when the MUC subdistrict was created, we neglected to indicate the signage requirements. So we're proposing to amend 311-643 to indicate the MUC subdistrict is included in those requirements. In terms of the temporary sign requirements, the current language basically states that commercial and industrial signs, banners, posters, pennants, A-frame, sandwich board, and portable signs shall not be used on a permanent basis. The location and date of these signs shall be recorded with the building inspector. Such signs shall be permitted at the opening of new business or reopening of an existing business under new management or special sales of residential, commercial, or industrial district on 1 occasion per calendar year for a total period not to exceed 30 consecutive days unless otherwise permitted by the building inspector. The revised language is basically the same, except for stating that only 1 temporary sign will be permitted at the opening of a new business, and also changing that they would be allowed on 2 occasions per year for no more than 30 consecutive days for each occasion, as approved by permit from the building inspector. The reason for this change is there's been some interpretation issues with this particular requirement where it doesn't specify the number of temporary signs permitted. And the interpretation of the building division has always been that it's 1 sign, but he wanted to make sure it was clear within the regulations and ordinance so that there wasn't any more gray area in terms of the interpretation of the ordinance, as well as recognizing that there are reasonable occasions where we'd need to do this in more than 1 period per year. So he's allowed that to be increased to 2 times per year under the amendments being proposed here tonight. In terms of the MUC, the current language of Section 311-643 basically states that within the commercial 1, 2, and 3 zones, the following signs are permitted, and it then specifies all the requirements. This change is simply to state that the commercial 1, 2, 3, and MUC subdistrict are subject to the requirements that follow that. That is really the extent of the proposed amendments, and I'd certainly answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, any questions from the board? George?
All right, I just have one question, and I don't own a business in town, so I don't know how this impacts business owners that have corner lots. If I'm only limited to one sign, I'm only gonna have that sign on one street.
One temporary sign.
Right, but if I was advertising a sale, I could only advertise it on Mammoth Road as opposed to Mammoth Road and
Correct.
pick another road, Pillsbury, and I don't know what, like I said, I don't know. I would suspect if it's a big lot, you'd be limiting that individual from doing that.
And that's how it's been enforced by the building official for years. It's just a matter of actually specifying it specifically in the ordinance.
Okay, well, I understand that, and all I'm asking is the question, whether it's been asked before or not, doesn't matter to me, so. That's the only thing I have.
Anyone from the public have any questions, comments, concerns on the revisions that are being proposed? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board, and we will have to make a recommendation to the town council.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to recommend as presented by Tim Thompson for town council approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, motion by John, second by Rick. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Abstentions, shows affirmative. And motion carries. And that will go to the town council.
Sorry,
Great.
I'm late.
And you're non-voting now, Scott.
Got it.
That possible authority there, you know. Okay, next item is conceptual discussion, Elmer Pease, reuse of the former South Fire Station, tax map 6, lot 33A. And Elmer is here. You can have a seat. Just identify yourself for our records, please.
My name's Elmer Pease. I'm with PD Associates. I'm representing the owner in regard to the old fire station located on Buttrick Road. The gist of my conversation with the board this evening is primarily trying to figure out what types of uses we might be able to put in there, taking into consideration the lot is nestled into the, oh, in fact, there's a picture I just realized behind you. As you can see, it is in the overlay district, but it is not part of the overlay district. It allows a number of different uses, but because of the size of the lot, there are very few uses that are really able to use the building. So I'm trying to figure out how best to approach it in order not to keep coming back for each individual use. Because as I understand the process, and Tim can chime in here anytime he likes, that anytime we want to lease or sell the building, the potential tenant or buyer has to come in and get a use approved. I think it's first by the planning board as a recommendation to the ZBA, vice versa.
The zoning board has no play in terms of the actual use itself unless it's a use that's not permitted by the ordinance. The only time, if this were to come in and have a site plan approved for a specific use, would be allowed to continue under that use until such time that proposed change of use would have taken place, and then at that time, that would trigger the requirement for a site plan review at that point. So our site plan regulations trigger any change of use from one use category to another, or for any new development. So it would be the change of use that would trigger the requirement for site plan approval.
So so if it's not a fire station, that's a change of use?
Correct.
So anything that comes in is a change of use?
Right now, the first person in would have to do a change of use I believe about a year or so ago, there was a limousine business that actually had variances approved by the zoning board, but never actually followed through and came to the planning board for that use. I know that Mr. Pease is on the zoning board agenda for next week for a variety of variances to pretty much every dimensional standard that is in our regulations, given the size of the lot. The lot is about 1/10 of an acre. Our minimum lot size for a commercial district is 1 acre in size. The entirety of the building and most of the lot itself is within building setbacks and green area setbacks. So there are some severe constraints associated with this particular lot.
So,
This is a challenge.
Mr. Chairman, if
It's
I may.
Yes,
unique.
John?
Tim, have you guys discussed with Elmer what's the ideal use for this property? Have you given him like a list of saying these 10 things are what we're sort of looking for?
It's the basic recommendation we've made to anybody since this property's gone through a couple of different ownerships since it was sold by the town. The recommendation staff has made to each successive property owner or representative of property owner is that the best use of this site is one that is extremely low traffic generating, is primarily storage type of use, one that does not require regular visits from the public or customers, given the fact that the parking arrangement that is currently out there, it doesn't really show wealth because of the angle of the photographs that I have on the board for you, but the majority of those parking spaces actually jut into the right-of-way of Buttrick Road, so all the parking that's currently out there in front of the building would be non-compliant from both a setback perspective as well as being within the subject property itself.
Okay, so let me just check for understanding, make sure that I understand what you just, if I was to interpret that, and I was someone trying to use this building, what I heard you just say to me is that, you can use this for storage and don't come here too often.
Basically, or those types of uses that could utilize the existing bays for their parking requirements.
That's, so, I mean,
There, again, it's,
it's not a great answer, but that's what I heard you say.
that's what we've told every property owner over the course of the last several years.
And I have met with the planning staff, and the zoning officer was in attendance. And what I'm trying to do is, along the same lines, is narrow down, there's a number of uses that are allowed in the district. What I'm trying to do is pair off everything but a few, so I don't have to keep coming back in case somebody comes and says, I'd like to do that. Because by the time I get prepared, get to the ZBA, get to the planning board, they go somewhere else. And I don't think that's fair to the client who owns the property. So in my discussions with the owner, I said, well, I've done a lot of work in Londonderry. Maybe I can find out if there is a group of uses that we could get approved, and then the building inspector could issue the use permit, as long as it complies with a certain set of guidelines. Now, as you can see in the picture behind you, there's a car that's actually parked perpendicular to the one of the garage bay doors, and it's very apparent that parking does not fit that way. What I've done is I have, if I may, sure. I've been able to fit 3 parallel parking spaces.
Share with him, Elmer.
That are 9 by 18.
Yeah, we can share.
Which would require a variance. So what I'm trying to do is trying to provide some parking on the site, limit the use to a non-retail.
Yeah, we're good. Just the building.
Thank you.
Just the building covers the whole piece of property.
So really the drawback here is preventing the public or creating the use that avoids the public from coming to the site. There are a lot of other commercial or business type uses that are allowed in the zone. I'm currently talking with an environmental group who have 2 people in their office. They want the garages for storage so they can store their items, warehouse them, and then take them to off-site and erect them. And it's a good fit, but in order to even bring them in, or someone similar to them, I still have to go through the process. So I'm hoping that by the time I get through this process, they haven't found something else. But they are very interested in the site because of its location. It's an ideal location. Unfortunately, it just doesn't have a lot of land attached to it.
There was a business that came in that talked to us about that property that was on the dairy line, the old furniture store. They were a telephone company. I mean, wouldn't that be something that could work in there? Or is it too small?
They had too many employees. They had a half dozen or so employees that were telecommuting but would come into the site, and there would be a number of them on site at different times
And
of
there's
the day.
no possibility of sharing the parking behind, with the business behind there?
We've recommended that to everyone we've spoken with.
We have two issues. In looking at the restaurant, even off-hour parking, I couldn't guarantee that if I made a deal with the person across the street to take a couple of parking spaces, that wouldn't create an issue with parking. In talking with the planning staff, I get the impression that their parking just barely meets their minimum as it is.
I'm not talking about the restaurant, I'm talking about that
The
bit.
condo behind us, unfortunately, the parking spaces are assigned because they're owned.
Oh,
So that makes an issue.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
think what I hear Elmer asking us is that you want to hear something from us along the lines of, we would be okay with a janitorial company that came and picked up their stuff at 5 o'clock at night, went off and cleaned, and then parked their cars back inside, or a limousine company, or this energy company that you're talking about, but somebody that is going to use the bays, and on occasion, they may have a car parked out front.
Yes. In
That's
other
basically
words,
what you're asking us is,
there are two people that would occupy the office area, which is only about probably 200 square feet inside. The building total size is about 2,200. Most of it's the 3 garages.
So what you're wondering from us is that if you brought a client in with that, would that be acceptable to the board? Is that the question?
Well, yes, and establishing some guidelines, saying if you have someone that doesn't need any more than 2 or 3 parking spaces with an occupant load of no more than 2 or 3. In other words, give me a set of guidelines. So I still, when I visit the ZBA, I'm going to try to get a variance for the same type of uses. I don't know if that's possible with the board here, but I'm going to add a couple of uses to that to see if they'll be willing to do that. And it'll all be based on my discussions with the board here this evening. But it just makes it a lot easier in a time frame process where someone says, geez, I really like that location, there's only me and one other person, and all our other people are off-site. To go through the process continually, it's kind of time-consuming.
Yes.
And I don't have a problem of coming back to the boards, it's just that I may lose a tenant in the process.
sure.
It's reasonable.
Yeah. Andre?
Just a question for Elmer. Your client purchased that building for a reason. I was just wondering
Well,
what reason.
we actually, my client is actually one of my partners, and he actually foreclosed because the prior owner defaulted. So here we are stuck with it, and he called me and said, what can I do with the building? So I have another unique situation that I have to deal with. So it wasn't by choice that I took the building.
I think what John says, 2 people, 3 cars or something, and whatever they can do with that, definitely not retail.
Mr.
Would
Chairman.
Laura.
I was just wondering-
Sorry.
Are we just talking about it to give you a general sense? Is there anything we can do to be useful tonight, or are we just trying to get a general idea of things tonight?
Well, I'd like to be able to go to the ZBA and say that the planning board is comfortable with A and B,
Well, I can
non-retail, that type of thing.
I can see why you're kind of stuck and how you'd be in danger of losing a client, and I appreciate that you're going to such creative lengths to try to find a way to use an unused building. So, if we can do anything to kind of give you a leg up towards getting it occupied, I think that'd be
Any
great. I'm just not
assistance you can
I'm not
offer,
sure what we
I'd
can do.
appreciate.
I don't know how we can give you something for the ZBA, because it's really up to them in the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, not the
but-
use.
But the use is what we those are domains, not the ZBA's.
Would,
but-
Mr. Chairman, would something like a dry cleaner work in that?
No.
No.
because there's
That's
too
a
much-
retail.
Right.
You'd have
There's
too
too
many
much
people
traffic.
going to the site to pick up.
That's not a through street.
Oh, okay.
And again, that's what staff's concern was, is always the parking, how the parking would be laid out on the site. And that's why the limousine company had gone to the zoning board and had actually gotten the variance. And that's what was going to happen, is the driver was gonna come in, pull the limousine out, put his park his vehicle in the building, and then he'd be gone for the evening, return with the limousine, switch him out again, and
So, Mr.
that's
Chairman,
what
if I
had been
could,
presented.
keeping in with what Laura's saying, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, that's not a through street?
No.
Where does the dead end at, up near Butler
It doesn't
Road?
dead end.
Technically, it's not a through street. It may go through,
Goes up
But-
to,
It's an emergency exit only.
But there's nothing there, no barrier stopping anybody from using it.
I think there's a sign there that says it's not a through street.
And I don't often see people use it.
I'm wondering how much traffic does use it, and would a possibility be just taking the access off of 102, or, restricting access off of 102, and then,
One of the many items we've discussed with Elmer and other potential developers of the property is, looking at abandoning a portion of the roadway, creating a cul-de-sac turnaround, and then maybe even gaining some additional land that you could use for parking, but that would involve working with the Coach Stop restaurant as well, so.
Nobody's gonna give up a driveway on 102 when they don't grant anymore. That's what I'm guessing. So, in
my
keeping
guess
with,
as well, but
keeping with Laura's idea of being useful, what, could it be possible that we could say that the planning board, if the planning board feels that these limited types of use would be in the spirit of what we sold this building to do, because we sold the building, the town did, and say that if it's, in the spirit of the one or two people in this in and out, that if the applicant worked with staff, and staff made a recommendation to the board that this use would be one that would be favorable for this property, would that be useful? Would that be us being useful?
If we could do that, that sounds good.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
probably as useful, I think, as we can be,
the moment, yeah.
other than making it generic, and we've talked about that.
The best approach I've seen that I can see at this point is if Elmer is successful with his variances, he'd need to get a site plan approved for the site that basically says, these are the range of uses that would be allowed with this particular layout, and if the board were to approve that, that would give a little bit of flexibility to Elmer as he markets the property. But ultimately, we'd still need to have a site plan approval before any occupancy could take place and change on the building itself.
So in order to be useful, we have to have that first.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think there's going to be at least
Hey, Elmer, I
a
tried.
range of things.
Well, no, well, at least, listen, I appreciate the support from the board. However,
No,
I'm not sure what the word would be.
I think we got it.
Unofficial, I guess, would be the best way.
Useful. Useful use.
But it gives me a little bit more information for me to approach the ZBA, and I have to make the argument with the ZBA to say, here's what I can do with the property, so long as I eliminate, 85% of the uses allowed in the zone. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's a limited piece of property. But I still think that there are a number of uses that can be used with, 2 or 3 parking spaces. I don't think that's a detriment to the property.
No, I mean, it's rather unique,
a-
for
yes.
what we have for properties.
Exactly.
Can
So,
we make any recommendation to the zoning board? The way we do to town council, or they really don't appreciate that?
Well,
The members of the board are certainly welcome to attend the zoning board meeting and testify during the meeting, but because it's a quasi-judicial body, it really needs to be in that realm rather than an official recommendation from the planning board.
yeah, it's not really like a discussion there at all.
So it sounds like as
Black and
long as
white.
the business that you put in there is not retail,
retail.
and that it only has 2 or 3 at the most parking spaces.
The occupant load is
Right.
no greater than 3.
Then you're not going to find an argument with us, is it?
The trick in allowing for a site plan to be approved with a range of uses is determining traffic impact, because different uses have different traffic impacts. The impact fee would vary depending on the different kind of use. So we'd have to be relatively creative in determining how that how the satisfaction of that portion of our regulations would be met.
Okay. You know, we sold the building, so I mean, you know.
Well, listen, I know you have other people here, so I get the gist of your discussion. I'll move forward.
Yeah, it's kind of like a very narrow focus of things, you know, I think what Tim said, but at least with the site plan, we have to give you some flexibility with what could be on there for uses.
And I think that's important. So once I get through the first planning board process, what it does is that kind of pegs what we can do from that point forward, and that's going to make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a multi-step process, and the big thing is what, you know, what can I do there?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome. Let's see. Next, we have central discussion, Londonderry Freezer Warehouse. Tax map 15, lots 22 and 124. And this is discuss an expansion plan and a rezoning.
Good evening, my name is Robert Baskerville. With your permission, can we pass out a handout?
Thank you.
Okay.
I did.
As I stated, I'm Robert Baskerville of Bedford Design. Katie Weiss is passing out our presentation package tonight for the board, which has the PowerPoint presentation, our plans, and some additional notes on it. Also in the audience tonight is Ed Doherty, the general manager of Londonderry Freezer Warehouse and Highwood Cold Storage. I'd like to give you a brief history of the facilities in town. We have been here 4 times in the past. The original part of this building was originally approved in 1998 and built in 1998 at about 60,000 square feet. We came back in 2000 and got an addition for about an additional 30,000 square feet. After that, we went to the other side of town, right on the Derry line. And in 2002, we were able to build a 101,000 square foot freezer warehouse. And we added on to that in 2005 with an additional 25,000 square feet. So we have been in front of this board 4 times. Londonderry Freezer has been a good corporate citizen now for a dozen years. Both of these buildings are located on Route 28. However, I think most of the people wouldn't recognize them. They're very quiet warehouse uses. There's no manufacturing on either site. For those of you not familiar with it, they are a very high-tech freezer warehouse. The vast majority of the space is kept, I believe, at 10 below zero. A lot of the inventory comes from the southern hemisphere, South America, and from Southeast Asia. And then it's shipped out at various holidays to every type of store imaginable. They've been a good corporate citizen. If you could switch to the next page. What we would like to propose is one more addition in town of 82,000 square feet. 77,000 of that would be freezer warehouse space. The front of the building would have a 5,000 square foot footprint, 2-story building containing office and quality control uses. We envision that we need 5 more warehouse employees for the additional warehouse space. We have 6 office employees that are now located at Highwood Cold Storage. We'd like to move those from Highwood Cold Storage to this facility. That's the building you see breaking out from the front of the building. The current office facility for Highwood Cold Storage is a nice brick facade with granite lintels. It's an attractive-looking building. The parking you see next to the existing building, I believe, is about 46 parking spaces. We have never required anywhere near that amount. We'd like to reserve that for the warehouse employees. We currently have 15, would go to 20. So there's 46 spots there. We envision 6 office personnel. We are adding 24 spots. They do get some government employees come in for inspections, food inspections and other such inspections. So we propose parking that we believe greatly exceeds what would be required. However, even at that amount, will be greatly below the calculated number for a typical warehouse use. Previous approvals have allowed us to have reductions in the parking space, and we have on previous plans shown future parking spaces to be constructed if necessary. But we've never come close to actually needing those spaces. So that's a discussion we would also have to have once we submit. We plan no additional truck docks. There'd be no wetland permit for this facility. The entrance stays where it is. The only thing we would do is when trucks take the right-hand turn now, they're going over onto the grass a bit. So we'd like to add just a little more radius so the truck stays in the pavement and nice up the entrance a bit. We have been in to see the fire chief with this plan. He's reviewed the fire access for the building, and he's satisfactory with the layout of the building. Our drainage for the site can be up in front of the front parking lot, but the majority of it will be behind the building. And we have a nice large enough area to handle our drainage. We don't foresee a problem. In a few moments, I'll have Katie talk about the screening and the landscape that we're going to do out front. Talking about traffic a little bit, we went back and found our original 1997 traffic letter to Peter Lowett. And Ed Doherty originally forecast there'd be about an average of 15 trucks per day with a peak of about 35 trucks during the holiday season. Things have changed somewhat, but he basically was dead on with his forecast at that time. We now have increased the space by about 50%, but we have been tracking the truck use this month. He's averaging 19.2 trucks a day. His high day was 31 trucks. Strictly weekdays. He has the ability with the next edition. Right now, he's got enough room that he schedules his inbound traffic when material is brought to the factory or to the warehouse. Right now, outgoing traffic that's being picked up is on a first-come, first-served basis. He may switch that to being scheduled in the future because it'll just help change the traffic through the day. We track the traffic. The majority of the traffic is in the AM. I just wanted to check my number. During the morning first hour from 8 to 9, we've been averaging 4.4 truck arrivals. When a truck shows up, it takes about an hour to either unload it, load it, and get it back out. During the 4:30 to 6 p.m. period, there's been less than one truck per day, 0.7. On rare occasion, a truck will show up. We've had one show up after 5. He gets struck in traffic. He gets out of another appointment late. They do service that occasional truck that shows up after 5. We'll continue to monitor the truck traffic. I'm going to turn it over to Katie for a minute. The front of our building has a very large setback to Route 28, 360 feet.
The entrance to the park will be directly across from the entrance to the building, so employees will have easy access to the park. The park is really there to serve two purposes. The first purpose is to provide screening from Route 28. There will be berms along the outside as well as the inside, and there'll be evergreen screening, similar to Highwood Cold Storage, where you can't see the building at all from the outside, and also be deciduous plantings and shrubs and things. But also, it's there to provide a place for the employees to go outside at lunch, have some time to walk around or do something during their break. And that's it for the park.
Now I would like to discuss our reason for requesting a discussion on a possible rezoning of the parcel. We have purchased another parcel on the front, which allows us to expand. But when looking at the C2 requirements, we are currently in the C2 zone. One moment, okay. And those requirements, when you read the preamble to the zoning ordinance, they talk about the objectives and characteristics, state how that zone is designed for retail uses, financial institutions, service-oriented businesses, office buildings, the types of facilities that have many employees or quite often high-traffic customer flows, so you end up with a smaller building and a very large parking lot. Our facility is almost the reverse of that. The majority of our space isn't habitable. You go in and you can't stay there that long and you have to come back out. So we have very few employees and need very little pavement space per square foot. When taking a look at the two zones, we meet all of the requirements of C2 and all of the requirement of the industrial zone, with one exception, maximum building coverage. The maximum building coverage in C2 is limited to 25%, but they ask you to try to maintain a 33% green space. 33% a lot, a third of it stays green. We can keep over 50% of our site green, but we cannot expand and stay under that maximum building coverage. When you take a look at the preamble for the industrial zone, it specifically says it's for manufacturing and warehouse uses. And when they design that zone, there is no maximum building coverage. It's designed to be much more flexible. So we do have one requirement that we can't meet as part of a commercial zone. So we are going to respectfully, we're going to continue. I've got a little more presentation, but we're going to ask you for your support to the town council in possibly rezoning this district to industrial 1. Tim just switched to the zoning overview map. We wanted to show you. Nope, can you go back one, Tim? The colors didn't show up very good in this. There's two colors of purple up there, a light purple and a darker purple. Much better on my computer screen at the office.
All depends upon the screen.
Yes.
The light purple that you see in this area here and in this area here is the industrial 1. The darker purple around this edge is the industrial 2. The red being the C2 district, the deep red, then the lighter red is the commercial 1 district.
You've also got some more industrial 2 way over to the right also,
Yep.
off of 28. So on Route 28, you have industrial north of us, east of us, west of us. Predominantly, they're on parcels that don't front immediately on Route 28, but they're accessed through driveway onto backland. If you take a look at the shape of our lot, which we have substituted in purple, we have very little frontage. It's a very long lot, which isn't very wide, but it's really not oriented toward commercial use. If you can go to the next sheet, we're then going to superimpose a few things. The word site comes in about where our addition would be. There are two residential zones on the two adjacent north-south streets. To our east, there's a large piece that is put into conservation as part of the I-93, or it might have been the Airport Access Road widening project.
Home Depot, actually.
Home Depot, yeah.
Oh, yeah, oh, the Home Depot.
Yes.
Okay, right. But that whole parcel to the east of us is put into conservation. There's a long, narrow parcel to the west of us, which has, I believe, 3 different constraints. It also has a very deep lot that, again, isn't very wide. Be very hard to make into a commercial use. There's also a small hill on it. From our property, it goes up 10 to 15 feet to the top, then drops down an additional 20 or 25 feet to the houses that you see on Mammoth Road. So we've got a natural formation there that blocks the visibility of our project from the houses on Mammoth Road. Also going back, I believe on the west side of that long lot is the Tennessee gas line, also goes through there. So you've also got the gas line that goes along behind those houses in between our property. To the south of us is all wetlands. They're part of the Wetland Conservation District. I'm not sure if you call them prime wetlands in Londonderry, but they are untouchable. So we will have no abutters and no use to our east. We've got very valuable wetlands to our south. We have buffers, gas lines, and natural features to our west. And we have very little in the way of, we're kind of an isolated location. In addition, when you really think about our property, we are, per the definition zone ordinance, a prime candidate for the industrial use. We're a warehouse use. this property really can't be converted. And I think it'll stay that way for the foreseeable future. With that, I don't want to take up too much of the evening. I'd like your opinions. I'd like to answer any questions you may have, hear your comments.
Okay, thank you. Is that Andre?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been working with the applicant for quite some time now, at least for the last couple of years. And the initial conversations with this particular applicant was, one, I guess, working from our economic development hat, is to try to, if there's going to be any expansion happening in Londonderry or at this site, hopefully it will happen in Londonderry. I know this applicant has other property in other communities that he could, that are fully permitted, that he could easily build the facility, but the fact that he's looking to build here in Londonderry, I think is a good thing. From the rezoning aspect of it, I know that we had a meeting, staff had a meeting with the applicant regarding that. And part of the reason why staff is supporting it is when we look at the area is a composite of C1, C2, I1. Given that I1 is our light industrial use, and the site and the use on the site is not going to be a new use, it's going to be a continuation of an existing use. And given that the I1 zone is a light industrial zone, if this was a I2 proposal, I think we'd be having a very different discussion on that. But it is an I1 proposal. The concern is that what happens after if Mr. Doherty decides that the freezer warehouse business is no longer what he wants to do, and another use comes in there of a comparable use, then I think nothing changes. If somebody comes in there and wants to use it as a commercial use, obviously the town will have the opportunity to relook at that and see if that is a right fit for that particular lot. So that would have to come back to the board for consideration. So this particular use, again, this has been a use that's been around since 1998 and has gone through several iterations. And one of the things in the community development world is that, boy, if you can, about 60 to 80% of your development comes from existing businesses, and those business expansion. And Londonderry has been blessed with not only this type of use, but other businesses in town that has expanded over the last several years. So in order to keep a good business like this in town, boy, I think this is a small request to consider.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre. Anything, John?
Yeah, just, again, we'll work with Bedford Design as far as the drainage, and it's good to hear that they'll try to address that radius on Buckingham Road. That's a bear. That's all I have tonight.
Tim?
I think Andre covered most of the reasons for the staff support of the rezoning. The inevitable question may come up, isn't this a spot zoning? In this case, I do not believe it is. There is industrial zoning within the reasonable proximity of the property. The use is long established as a warehouse use, which is a typically industrial use. So staff believes that this is a better option than attempting to go for the variance for the building coverage for the commercial district. We always encourage applicants to try to exhaust administrative remedies and legislative remedies before going to the quasi-judicial body of the ZBA to request a variance. In terms of, Bob briefly touched upon the parking. The parking requirements we have today do allow for a conditional use permit that would allow the planning board to reduce the required number of parking spaces on the site, so they would not have to design future parking as they did have to do in the past back in the late 90s and early 2000s. They do have similar uses, obviously, in the same community, so they can reasonably demonstrate that the parking requirements for this particular use do not trigger the requirements from our ordinance. And I think there's a very good case to be made that this is a good candidate for a parking reduction by conditional use permit, which is now allowed by our zoning ordinance. Encouraged by the initial design I've seen, and I look forward to working with them through the process.
Thanks, Tim. Janos?
When we reviewed originally the first building and then addition, we're the ones who were putting that requirement for future parking, and we observed that for many years there was no need to expand the parking lot. So this was just, I wanted to add it to it, that there was never used for expand the parking lot. So the reduction is appropriate.
Okay, good, good. I know Ed Doherty and the company's been definitely a very good neighbor, and I remember those 4 times that he was in, so. I'll go through the board. I'll start with Scott. Any questions?
No, to me, it makes sense.
Yeah, and also the zoning, supportive of the zoning
Yeah,
change.
it does make sense to change it to the I-1.
Rick?
Well said.
Okay, John?
Yeah, Londonderry Freezer's been a great neighbor, so, I'm supportive.
Yeah. Dana?
All for it?
I think it's fine.
I'm supportive.
Lynn?
I live up near there, and I've always found it to be very unobtrusive, and I fully support it. Good neighbor.
Laura?
I'm curious to know if anybody has anything to say about it, that's all.
George?
Yeah, I think it's great.
I mean, it's, most people never even know what's there.
Yeah.
Probably one thing, you might have to go to the Heritage Commission for building design, but I don't think that'll be an obstacle at all.
We've been there before.
Yes. Nice group.
He does say so
You do,
himself.
J.C., so.
Oh, would you happen to be a member of that group?
Patting yourself on the back, are you?
Wow.
And as far as the shrubbery and everything, I guess we've got a list of, the types of plants and everything, but one thing we always insist upon is purple lilac, because that's the state flower. It smells like the spring.
Yes,
Right,
I'm
right,
writing
Jim?
it down.
The board okay with this coming forward to a public hearing for the rezoning request next month?
I don't have a problem at all, and I think it's probably appropriate. It's, warehousing is very, not intensive use of the land at all, compatible with what is there, so.
That'd be January 12th for the public
January
hearing.
12th?
Need the submission in a couple of weeks, actually. I'll get back to you with the deadline.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, because that's our next public hearing, January 12th. Plan on that.
All right.
Any questions of us?
We're all set.
Thank you.
Okay.
We wanted to get your viewpoint. We're very encouraged by the viewpoint. It's a great facility, and we'll be proud to build in town.
Oh, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next, another conceptual discussion. This is a possible McDonald's restaurant. MUC Sub-District Conditional Use Permit Requirements, Tax Map 15, Lot 60-2. And I think this is next to,
Bless you.
Thank you.
Dunkin' Donuts, isn't it? On,
Vista Ridge.
okay, Vista Ridge.
Near there.
Okay, I gotta go, check my location here.
Same side of the street as the Subway.
It's right across from the bus terminal.
Oh,
It's very
boy.
close from-
This is the corner of Vista Ridge and
What a spot.
Everybody can run across and get their coffee and dodge the traffic.
this would be in front of the
When you're at-
retail and restaurant proposal that you saw a few months ago from
Oh.
Coastal Partners.
Yes.
So, Tim, has that gone anywhere, that, was
They're
that,
working. We've had a traffic scoping meeting, and they're developing plans at this point.
so we're talking now a very nice restaurant, and then we're talking McDonald's.
We have no
and-
idea about any tenants at this point.
Potential, that's the way it's,
No, I know, it's a
Yeah.
conceptual discussion.
yeah.
That's all this is, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, my name is Frank Montero. I'm a site engineer with MHF Design in Salem, New Hampshire. Here tonight representing two parties. The landowner who's in the audience, Dave Sanderson, he's the trustee of Londonderry GC Realty Trust. And with me to my right is Tessa Bernstein. She's a construction manager with McDonald's. The plan up on the board, as mentioned, the site is off exit 5 at the corner of Rockingham Road and Vista Ridge Road, or Vista Ridge Drive. Mr. Sanderson's owned this property for several years, and back in 2006, September of 6, the DOT made a taking on the front of the property to widen Route 28. And just to give you an idea of the width of the taking, doesn't show up well on that slide there. What I did is I colored the former lot line in the front of the property in pink here, so you get an idea. It was about a .33 acre taking, varied in width from 70 to 50 feet at the closest point. It's known as map 15, lot 60-2. It's just over an acre in size after the taking. It's been rezoned to mixed-use commercial. The taking, as I mentioned, created a severe hardship on the potential development on this parcel. Mr. Sanderson's had a few developers look at the piece in the past, talked to a few bank-type users, gas station users, and quick service restaurants, and it just seems to be too small to fit everything that's been requested by the potential tenants. Furthermore, there's about a 10-foot grade difference between the front of the site and the rear of the parcel. The rear of the parcel is about 10 feet higher than the road, which further restricts how the site lays out horizontally. Based on the mixed-use district, this proposed footprint or layout that you're seeing here for a quick-service restaurant, we believe would need 3 conditional use permits. One for the fast food use itself, the second for the drive-through window, and then under this layout we'd have some dimensional relief required for buffers and setbacks that I'll go through. First off, this footprint is the smallest footprint that McDonald's has in their portfolio. It's about 3,300 square feet with 50 seats. And the restriction on the development with the taking is the front property lines are kind of skewed to the rear property line, so it's difficult to get a nice symmetrical layout on these on this parcel. But what we did on this is we held the rear lot line in terms of the 15-foot green setback to parking, and what that created was a restriction in the front for the parking that's angled along 28. We end up with about, let's see, it's about 15 feet of green space to the lot line, and at one point 9 feet in another, and that's to the angled property line. If you actually look at the drawing, we have more green space to the actual edge of the road. We'd end up with about 25 feet at the closest point to the road, and over 30 feet on the other corner of the parking spaces. A small portion of the building corner near the drive-through window is also in the building setback. 60 feet is required, and this layout is showing 53 feet is proposed at that corner. The total open space on the lot is met. We need 33% per zoning. This layout has about 38% open space. We believe the internal green space is met. 10% of the parking lot, we have about 14%. The key thing in my mind is the drive-through queue works very well on this layout. We have more than the 10 vehicle stack that the town typically looks for these developments. Proposing 2 curb cuts. The driveways, they're both 35 feet wide along the lot line to facilitate tractor-trailer access for deliveries. The driveway off of 28 is a right-in, right-out only with the median that exists out in 28. And a proposed drive on Vista Ridge is a full-access driveway. Some additional constraints with the topography of the land, or the natural composite of the land, is a wetland ditch that runs diagonally through the property. That's been delineated by Mark West. Any development on this lot would require filling of that wetland area. It is less than a half acre, so it doesn't fall into the town's conservation overlay district. And it's about 5,100 square feet if we were to fill that swale. And it runs down to a culvert that goes under Vista Ridge Drive. Adjacent to the development to the left on the abutters property, there is a larger wetland that exceeds a half acre, and you can just see the edge of the 50-foot buffer to the left there. So we would comply with that buffer requirement with this layout. We would expect to provide above-ground detention at the corner of the development to the right of the parking spaces along Vista Ridge Drive. We have land area available there, and we also have an area directly in front of the building adjacent to 28. That's a basic overview of what we're proposing. We're obviously here for conceptual discussion to get input from the board and get some initial feedback.
Okay, thank you. Andre?
I just had a few comments. One, with regard to the functional use of the property, the curb cut off of Route 28 is something that I think we should give strong consideration to. Much like Solvin Realty, if it's on the corner of Perkins Road and Route 28, the access is off of Perkins Road. The construction company across the street is off of Sims Drive. I think we should make every attempt to make sure that the access point is limited to off of Vista Ridge Drive. The main purpose of Route 28 is minor arterial, is to get you from point A to point B. The more curb cuts you got on there, the more difficult you'll have to get from point A to point B. So that is one of the concerns I would have. And two, I know that when we went through the small area master plan, one of the things that we were trying to the concept that we're trying to advance is that of a pedestrian-friendly type of concept, and that's why we put the mixed-use development together. And at least the plan I see before me doesn't have too many of those pedestrian type of facilities there to encourage people to walk and not always have to use your car. There is a residential entity behind there, as well as up the street up Perkins Drive. But the way this is laid out is purely dependent on the automobile. But those are just a couple of observations I had in seeing this for the first time.
Okay, thanks.
Tim and I had met with Frank and the applicant, as well as a McDonald's rep, and Frank, I appreciate you addressing the drainage out there. Again, we had some discussion regarding that. My only other observation would be the entrance off of Vista Ridge Drive, and again, just knowing what the queue, looking at what the queue is going to be from people coming down Vista Ridge with that light on at that intersection of Vista Ridge and Sims. We'll have to take a look at that and just make sure we don't have any conflicts with that. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thanks. Tim?
A couple of things I think that I would like to hear from the board tonight, and I know the applicant would as well. As Frank mentioned, the use of fast food restaurant is not a permitted use within this district. It is only permitted by conditional use permit. There are 4 conditional use permit criteria for the use. Those are that it's a use consistent with the vision and statements and recommendations of the Northwest Small Area Master Plan or the most recently adopted Town Master Plan, that granting the application is in the public interest, that the property in question is reasonably suited for the use. And the fourth, and the one I think is probably the most problematic for this particular use, is that the design of the site represents, to the extent practicable, a minimization of impacts to natural resources and maximizes provision of green space and accommodation of non-vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Those are the 4 criteria the planning board will have to determine are met in order to allow this use to take place on the site. The issues related to the dimensional deficiencies with the green area setback and the building setback. This section of our ordinance does allow the planning board to grant conditional use permits to reduce and modify dimensional requirements. The 2 additional criteria that would need to be met in addition to the 4 I've already mentioned is that the applicant has demonstrated the alternative design for which the conditional use permit is sought is not feasible without relief from the strict terms of the ordinance, while not diminishing surrounding property values or the ability of nearby parcels to develop in accordance with their zoning district. And secondly, that the application demonstrates the alternative design does not impact general health, safety, and welfare of the town, and is otherwise in compliance with all requirements of the zoning ordinance, site plan regulations, subdivision regulations, as applicable to the proposed project. Those are the criteria the board would have to make. If the board finds that those aren't met, this site would then require additional variances from the zoning board of adjustment. But I think the primary concern that staff has with this particular proposal is the use itself and whether or not it meets those criteria from the conditional use permit criteria. As you may recall, when the board was developing the mixed-use commercial district, at one point the board had taken out fast food restaurants as a permitted use. We're not going to allow them at all, but did determine at the end of the process to allow them only by conditional use permit where these types of criteria could be met. So that really is the main feedback I'm looking for from the board tonight.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I'll start the other end with George.
My biggest concern was the 28 access, but Andres pointed that out, so I'll reserve and listen to everybody else.
Yeah, okay. Laura?
Just a practical question. If there were deliveries made to a McDonald's here, it seems like a truck coming in would really block everything up. Where would that be handled?
They're showing the loading area in this hatched area right here.
Isn't it on the outside of the
Drive-through queue?
drive-through queue?
Yes.
So they'd be unloading cars and scampering across the drive-through line into the...
My assumption is that the loading would be during non-peak hours of traffic, but that is something that would be of concern if we were to move forward through the site plan review on this.
I sympathize with anybody who's trying to find a useful use for a tough piece of property, but just to be blunt, this really doesn't seem in keeping with anything I heard about what people want to see at Exit 5. It's why we didn't include it as a, fast food as a use that should be allowed. And I suppose before this sounded like a good idea, I'd have to hear a lot of public support for it because it really doesn't sound like anything anybody wanted. Sorry.
Yeah, just to address your, is it okay if I address the question, Tim? Yeah, we understand the deliveries, like most fast food restaurants do, encumber the drive-throughs and parking spaces. Typically, they're done early in the morning, obviously in off-peak. With respect to driveways, I mean, if you were to restrict this parcel to one driveway, you wouldn't be able to get a tractor trailer in and out of the site. So that would be an important factor for, really for providing that second driveway access, just to point that out.
Lynn?
I guess my sentiments echo Andres and Laura's. It just seems like we're giving up a lot for, all the work we put into the new district. It seems like we're giving up a lot if we went forward with this.
I agree. I think a more appropriate use might be a bank or something that's not fast food.
Sure.
It sounds like we have a lot of trouble with the traffic requirement that Tim mentioned. I mean, the success of the business requires it to have a lot of traffic. So I don't think it's the right place for that kind of a activity.
Dana?
I'd have to echo everything that everybody else is saying. I don't like the extra curb cut for Route 28. It's going to be more traffic generation, and I just don't think it's right for the site.
John?
The hard part about this job up here is that people have land and they have the right to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we deem that nothing is suitable for this lot, then that becomes a problem. So I mean, I hear what everybody is saying, but we also have to keep that in mind when we're looking at these things.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing further.
Okay.
Well said.
Rick? Scott?
No, I'm not opposed to fast food restaurants as far as that being there. I just think what concerns me most is the traffic flow and the impact it'll have on that intersection. And I think it's pretty, it's pretty constricted as far as what they have for parking spaces allowed, and unloading of the tractor trailers and things like that.
Yeah, I think when we went through the master plan development for that area and everything, it really wasn't envisioned at first for fast food, and I think one of the reasons is because of the high volume of traffic through there. And the other, it's more like a, probably looking for, pedestrian-type uses also. This is not pedestrian-friendly at all, and that's, I think, is one of the difficulties with it. You're practically across the street from a bus station, you're going to find people crossing a very busy highway, and that's dangerous to get there. And then I don't like the curb cut out onto 28. I think what you find is traffic will be sitting there and no one can get in and out of that place anyway. So it's really not, for the volume of traffic of a fast food place, it's just not a good location. And I think if we want a viable business for fast food, I think traffic could be more of a problem for you than for us. Mary, just your name and address in the microphone, please. That's what people at home can hear you.
Okay, Mary Tatro, 15 Isabella Drive. I want to speak up for fast food, okay? McDonald's is one of the largest corporations in the United States, and they're there for a reason. I don't think the entrance on 28 is such a good idea, but to say that nobody asked for fast food at this location, therefore nobody in Londonderry really wants fast food, I think is really wrong. And I do believe if we had a second McDonald's, we would achieve the correct ratio of Dunkin' Donuts to McDonald's for our town.
I hadn't considered that ratio, but there is there's a place right next to Dunkin' Donuts on 28. That's probably is not as there's traffic, but not to the problems that they're going to have here.
And to the point about crossing the street, we really need some ways to cross the highways in our town. I've always had a big problem that you cannot, Andre will tell me, when he worked at the town hall on 102, he had to drive to get lunch. Okay? If we're planning these big developments for Route 28 with the airport, the highway coming over, I think we should address the idea of pedestrians and maybe have a cross light.
Yes. I think, especially
so
for 102.
So they could walk to their fast food.
Yes, that's what we're looking, because the bus facility is going to lend for walking, and this is, we want to, blend, the use of automobile, but more with walking and everything. Thank you.
It has been my experience, though, living near the McDonald's that is in town right now, that it doesn't matter whether or not there's sidewalks or the traffic is terrible or anything else. If kids want to get to that McDonald's, they're going to get to that McDonald's. So I don't think there's a problem with, Vista Ridge people have the sidewalk on the other side of their street, on the other side of their, and they have a sidewalk down the hill.
Right.
So, I mean, they will walk to McDonald's. I don't think that that's a problem, but I do think that because of all of the concessions that would have to be made in order for this building to be put on that parcel, that's our problem.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to do and have a viable McDonald's.
Can I ask a question? If you had to give up the entrance on Route 28, could you get a tractor trailer in and out?
No, I mean, not unless you made something very small on the site. I mean, you just can't circulate around that lot and get out.
Right.
I understand the concerns about traffic and everything, and if I could just make a couple points. There is a pedestrian crosswalk now across 28 from the bus stop. So there is a design for pedestrian crossing there. I felt that this type of use would complement actually the bus stop. For people waiting for the buses and so forth could actually walk across the street and use this facility. Obviously, the folks up on Vista Ridge could walk down. There is a sidewalk all the way along the right side of that road. So I would make a case that there is some pedestrian access to this site. But in terms of the driveways, I understand there's concerns about traffic. There is a signalized intersection here, so it's controlled traffic, controlled speeds. With the raised median on 28, the right-in, right-out access, you don't have any left turns there, so I'm not sure that no access is the right answer. I'm not sure you couldn't have right out, right in, or a combination like we're showing, but if you don't have a driveway on 28 at all, you're going to restrict your allowable uses that much more. And, again, I would like to point out that the size of this lot was reduced quite a bit by the state. If the hadn't taken place, we wouldn't need any dimensional relief on this layout. So, if I could, I guess what I'm hearing from the board is they don't like the, prefer the use at all.
No, it's probably a little more intensive than the size the lot would allow, and also the location. I mean, if it didn't generate as much traffic, something that didn't generate as much traffic would probably be better. Andre?
No, I just want to note, that in fairness to the applicant, that I did state that the Sovereign Realty and the construction company across the street had access off the side street, but I must note that the subway that was approved, I think staff was overruled regarding eliminating the curb cut there. There's an entrance-only curb cut off of Route 28, but the dual access is off the side road, Perkins Road, so there was an instance where that was allowed.
Well, I see an awful lot of people taking that as an exit, though.
We knew that. That's why we recommended not to.
State doesn't always listen to our recommendations. We're the ones that have to live with it, though.
Yeah. I think my concern is not so much the use itself on this particular parcel as it is making sure that it meets that fourth criteria, with that being the impact on natural resources and maximizing green space and accommodation of non-vehicular and pedestrian traffic. I just don't see it in this design of the site at all.
Yeah, that's, my feeling. I don't think we could do the
If they
condition.
made a green roof?
And
Well, let me ask you a question, Tim. If the dimensional relief was in the rear, would that make a difference as opposed to the front?
I'm just talking about the use itself, in order to meet the conditional use permit criteria for the use. The dimensional stuff, I think you've got a good case for the dimensional things. It's the use itself and meeting that criteria that is of concern to me in terms of the way that the small area master plan went through the process and the way that this ordinance itself was developed.
And I mean, as we went through the master planning process, there's a lot of input from that, people from that area up there also.
So is it both the fast food use and the drive-through, or is one more favorable?
It's the
than
fast
other?
food use. The fast food use itself requires the conditional use permit. The drive-through is, because we expect the drive-through in a fast food situation, I wouldn't consider that to be a separate conditional use permit.
It's just because there's no place on this lot for you to put anything green other than on the outside.
And that's being reduced by conditional use permit,
Right.
potentially.
Dave, you got any questions?
Yeah, good evening. Dave Sanderson. I'm representing the trust that owns property. Just a question, and I'm not sure this is the forum, but I've heard a lot of the pedestrian-friendly uses. Excuse my ignorance. Could you give me an example of what that might be, or?
So people could walk back and forth from another location freely to there and probably walk around in there freely without fear of probably being run over by a car.
Okay. So for instance, a bank, which appears to be permitted in that zone, would?
Yeah, a bank probably would not draw the amount of traffic that a fast food restaurant would draw.
And the bank would not require that conditional use permit either.
Yeah, they wouldn't require that, so it's, I'd look through the permitted uses that are there, for use of that property.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to highlight Frank's portion is that I'm just a small guy here. The state came and took a good portion of my property. I'm just limited. I don't know what else I can do, especially in these times. So
Yeah.
I would hope that the board might take that into account.
Yeah, I think the thing that probably you could work with staff to see what the other uses could go there, that don't require, a conditional use permit. Andre?
Just a quick question. Are you aware of the project that's been at least conceptually proposed to the planning board behind you?
Yes, I am.
I just wonder if there's any potential collaboration there, that whatever use you're considering, maybe there'd be some collaboration on making that pedestrian-friendly aspect of it.
Yeah, we had some brief conversations. I'd love to see that happen. I'm all for its project. The only
That's a good idea, Andre. Maybe it's something to pursue
The big problem with that is the grade difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna
The
put
grade
that
difference
on.
makes it very difficult, and there's likely going to be some larger retaining walls on the property to the.
Yeah,
to the
we,
south.
Can't put some stairways down the,
well, what the problem is, there's a 20-foot grade difference between the first floor of his building and the street. So we looked at internal connections between the properties. The problem is we'd have a wall on our property, which you can't put in the setbacks. You could either have a 20-foot high wall in the front along the road, or you'd have two 10-foot walls, one along the back and a 10-foot along the front. Somehow you have to break that grade up. So because of that reason, it doesn't seem to work for the two properties. But, I mean, we obviously could have pedestrian links, and we were trying to get a vehicular link to work.
Because I think if that were to be worked out somehow, I mean, you know,
Something
say if
to-
this is a use that is made of it, I would think that being connected to a shopping area, which people like to eat when they go shopping, that the connection, a pedestrian connection of some kind would
Go a
just
long
make
way
sense.
towards meeting that criteria.
Yeah, definitely something to think about and probably to, discuss.
Does it have to be a McDonald's? Couldn't it be something like a Panera Bread? That you could set the building back into the back end of the lot, have your or to the front, have your parking in the rear? And they're not gonna draw the same amount of traffic. Generally, people come in, they're gonna eat, or just come in, get their sandwich and go. Personally, I don't like drive-throughs. You know, they're a traffic generator. And, considering the potential of development along with the Vista Ridge Apartments and stuff, I would think that would be much more conducive to pedestrian traffic than a McDonald's. I could be wrong, but,
Just, if I could just interject, only because I'm kind of familiar with that industry, you should know that Panera Bread is about a 4,000 square foot building. They need 50 parking spaces, and they're actually looking to do drive-through these days as well. So it's
Yeah,
a
Mr.
function of the
Chairman,
times, unfortunately.
I think we're trying to design on the fly, and we're not qualified.
I'm just limited. I have such a small site now after the state took it. I'm hampered.
I don't think, sorry,
Yeah, it's all right, Laura. No,
I understand that you may have to find something that takes a small amount of space, but at least from my perspective, it's not the setbacks. I understand if the state took a bunch of the front of your property and you need us to consider, something that allows you some freedom up there, I think, like Tim said, that's reasonable, and we'd talk about that. I don't think that's it. It's the combination of things and a little bit of the history with all of the workshops that we had on what people wanted to happen up here and how it should kind of look. And so it's a combination of all those things, and that's why it ends up being a variance to get the fast food in there. So I know we can't design who comes or specify who occupies the building, but just a slightly less traffic-intensive use would make it much more feasible.
It's not C2 anymore.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I think, like, working with the other developer there, I think working with staff, maybe, generate some ideas.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll get to our feature entertainment tonight. That'll. And
You're gonna be doing on your
Okay,
That way, there's no conflicts here,
we're all set.
coming in or coming out.
Last item,
But that's not a road,
everyone.
a road you want to come out to.
Gotta bang it harder.
Folks, we'd like to go home at some point tonight, so if you
Okay.
can settle down.
Next item is a workshop. This is Woodmont Commons PUD Master Plan discussion, and we've had a previous discussion last month, and this is round 2, and turn it over to Mr. Kettenbach and Mr.
Chelman.
Chelman. I remember Chill, but that's Chelman. Pardon me.
For the record, my name is Mike Kettenbach. I'm the proponent of the project. I'm here with Mr. Mark Chillman. We were here a month ago. We're here again. I hope you've all had time to digest what was put before you before, and we're back here tonight to start discussing what we've proposed and what your ideas are, and to continue the process here for the master plan for Woodmont Commons. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Mark, and we'll continue our dialogue as we did last month. Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually Rick.
Rick, excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But that's okay. I don't know if the board members had any time to look at any of the materials that were submitted a month ago. A little update on what's taken
I was going
place.
to say, you could probably give us a review, and there's people here probably weren't here last month, that it'd be good for them.
I'll give you a quick update first. Basically taking direction from the board and also my client. Since the last meeting, we've met with folks in Derry. We met with some counselors, the DPW, the Planning and Economic Development Director, and had a good chat. We're going to keep them informed by each time I submit materials to Tim. I'm submitting to their planning and economic developer at the same time so that they can see what's happening. And at some point in time, it's not set yet, we're going to have a joint meeting with their planning board and their council just to talk about the project so they can understand it and start to get their arms around it. The other day, we also met with the police chief and his captain and brought them up to speed with the project. I won't go so far as to say they like the project, because that's not really their purview, but they would like to have a presence in the first phase village, which would be near the new market basket, and perhaps a presence on the other side of 93. They hadn't really decided. That's so far in the future at this point in time that they just don't know. We also met with fire, and that's actually one of the requirements in your submission requirements, and I'm just going to go to my list, which is a little bit perhaps easier, 2.8.9.2.17, and we discussed the requirement with the fire department and have agreed on some language that basically says that the project isn't going to be dealt with from a firefighting perspective any differently than any other part of town, except that due to its scale, at some point they will want a small station of some sort that will certainly have an ambulance, and depending on how the mix works out, some other equipment. And they've got long-range staffing thoughts in mind and everything, but that language is in the package that was submitted, page 14.
The police department also indicated they would like to have a presence there as well, and they thought that one building would serve both of them quite well. And they thought that it would also help them in their community policing as well, to have a street front location, and also emergency services thought that would be a good thing to have street level walk-in as well, just for any number of reasons. And they also felt that at least an ambulance and possibly another piece of apparatus as the future goes along, but to plan for it now would be the thing to do. And both of them preferred to have a presence in the southerly portion, because they felt they could service both well from there within minutes. And then the police thought they would also like to have a presence up on the westerly side as well at a later date. police also indicated that if there were issues with policing, that there might be the same thing that takes place at the airport, and there would be something that would be done contractually to ensure that there's always a police presence in the area at all times.
And the police department actually understood the more pedestrian scale concept of a station or a presence here, as opposed to a public safety building off, in a cornfield surrounded by parking. Whereas here it would be, could perhaps be in a townhouse type building, right up to the street with a sidewalk, more of an urban type station. And they understood it, thought it was pretty nice, thought it would work.
And one of the other things we discussed was also the possibility of a DAV presence in the same area, maybe adjacent or part of it, so that people could come for their licensing requirements and plates and things like that at the same time. So that kind of use is a good municipal use and would create a little more synergy and foot traffic in the town center type thing as well. So everybody understood it, and that also came out in the other charrette that we had with the public employees back in June.
So to help maybe with some folks who weren't here last month, I didn't bring the full last month's presentation because I didn't want to subject the board to that every month. Maybe we should post that. Actually, Tim's already posted it. So people can go to the town website and see the entire presentation. I think what I'll do is I'll just go quickly through the slides that I have tonight and then come back to this list, because this list lists the various submission requirements that are in the ordinance, including some optional ones where the board can, you guys can always ask for something like a study. I don't know at this stage what and whether something like that would be appropriate, but it's certainly there as an option. And I thought if we started to go through it, we could agree that, yep, you've got the present zoning indicated on page 2. That's great, or whatever. So we can basically start to take bites of the elephant, and at some point we'll have consumed the whole thing. So,
okay.
Do you want to say something, Mr. Chairman?
No, just doing some reading here, trying to listen at the same time. So, but
I'm going to come back to that list.
Yeah.
I just wanted to run through quickly this first sheet and what it shows. Basically, what these various sheets do is they attempt to address the submission requirements that were previously listed. As I mentioned earlier, this first page lists the overall maxima for the project, and it depicts one possible configuration of streets and buildings and that sort of thing. And then we can talk about this sort of detail on the next page, probably in greater detail. I'm sure certainly we will talk in greater detail. I've got a delicate balance of trying to keep the most flexibility for my clients, but provide you with some understanding of what it is you're approving. And that's a tension, honestly. So the first division from page 1 is that which is east of 93 and that which is west. If you add up everything on W1 and W2, you will come up with a little bit more than what's on the first page because of that flexibility factor. The next page breaks it down a little bit further. And here we've, and this is a restatement of something from the last meeting, that kind of turns out looking kind of sticky green color when it's projected. It actually looks yellow on my computer. We're showing residential, single-family residential adjacent with abutting single-family residential, and the package so far says we can't change that. That's something that's fixed. Now I would take to mean that if these lots got bigger, for example, deeper, that could be an okay thing, but that they shouldn't get smaller because the intent is to match basically what's nearby. And I think that was the intent of the ordinance too, with the buffer provisions that are in it. We've added topography.
wetlands. And then, this is the first page of the written portion of the master plan. Again, this is for folks who weren't here last month. This document is now 14, 15 pages. And this is in addition to the plan sheets to provide sort of additional rules of how the project will get built out and it comes back for site plan and subdivision. This process does not give the applicant the right to build anything. It only, once approved, will give him basically a revised zoning ordinance to then come back to seek subdivision and site plan applications.
Yes, yep.
So, I'm at your service. I can answer questions. We can start going through this list.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, John.
So if we're, there's, I've been involved with this, quite some time at this point, and there's always been something that's bugged me a little bit. And, and I haven't been able to quite put my finger on it until recently. After reading things and looking at these pieces and, and I didn't grow up here, but my family did. And then I, started listening to what people are saying in the community. And what I keep hearing is I keep hearing this being presented as the town center. I view it more as a village. But what I keep hearing from the people in the community is that the town center exists already. It exists at, Pillsbury and Mammoth Road. And Londonderry, from the town my wife grew up in, is different than what's being presented. This is the change. Change. Some people thought change was good a couple of years ago. Some people aren't really happy with that change. But but change needs to be managed. It's never going to be the town center near term. It's a 20-year project. I don't know what the marketing word is for it, but the people of this town know where the town center is, and that's where the parades are, and that's where Old Home Day happens, and that's what this town is all about. That's where the memorials are, etc. And what I would probably, it's a suggestion, but as you continue to develop your master plan, I think you almost have to look at it as I explained to somebody, things are normal until there's a new normal. A new normal is, after someone's spouse dies, there has to be a new normal. This is, in my mind, this is that drastic of a change. And I've had a long time to think about this, probably the better part of 18 months. But I finally think I've figured out the question I've been trying to ask all that time. I'm not expecting an answer, I'm just making a statement.
Well, I am not going to call this project the town center of Londonderry. It's not. It's a big project. It will have its own centers. It will have its own neighborhood centers. Now, what happens 20, 30, 40 years from now, I don't know. I'm not going to try to predict it. I hope it's a very nice place. I hope we're proud of it. And I hope some people consider it their neighborhood center. I'm sure they will. But this town has a lot of history. And you remember that stack of history books that John Michaels gave me. You can't wipe that out. You don't want to wipe that out. You don't want to turn your back on it. You'd be proud of it. And the town grew in various locations and in various formats for a very long time, just like Portsmouth, where I live. And this is just, it's new, it's different, and yet it's traditional. That's the irony. If we were planning this project in 1810, we would be planning it much the same physical manner because we would be planning it without thinking about automobiles. And that's, this project accommodates the automobile, but it's not dependent on the automobile. So hopefully in the future, it will be a very nice place.
I think, John, just to carry it a little bit further, I think in the charrettes we were showing how you could walk from one section to another, and each one of those are centers in these neighborhoods. And I think that's what we're trying to create, is a synergistic area where we have a connection of neighborhoods, not necessarily a new town center, but a series of neighborhoods that are connected and have commonality.
I understand. I'm also umpire chief over at LAFA, so I get to see 1,200 kids at a time, and I can tell you for sure this town wasn't built based on the automobile. I mean, because I drive 7 or 8 miles everywhere I go, and I get the whole thing of being able to walk places and everything. But what you know, at least for me, sitting on this planning board, and you know, and I may not be here next year, or I may or not, but for me, the people of this town came here for a reason. It's the reason they enjoy the town the way it is today. Some, and there are people who favor this change that I've heard. There are people that question it. There are people that talk about density. There are people that talk about what traffic it will bring to the town and everything. As you develop your master plan, I think there needs to be, I can't come up with a better phrase than the new normal, because that's what it's going to be. Because it will become normal at some point as this builds out over a 20-year period. I don't know how, I can't predict the future. I leave that to people smarter than me. But, you know, I think that's the way we have to build this, having never done it before. I mean, we didn't do it. I mean, you know, we're all doing this new. So, like I said, I'm not looking for a response. I'm just trying to express to you what I've heard over the last 2 months.
There's a lot of misconceptions. We had some discussions about that, some of those with the firemen. There was one conception that there would be 3,500 hotel rooms, for example. Not the case. And it's people looking at, if they've looked at anything, they've looked at the plans that allow flexibility, and they're doing multiplication and not looking at the overall limit, which is, I think, 550 rooms. So it's important if you have questions to ask, and, you know, that's my job. You know, I'm supposed to keep track of the technical things on this side with staff on your side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're welcome. Because actually, what is originally Londonderry, when it was first settled in 1719, is what is Eastderry now. And that was the town center. That's where everything, you know, revolved around that, the church. That's where all the original settlers are buried in the graveyard there. That was the original center. And then along came the railroad. Actually, probably first was the separation of Derry and Londonderry. And what it was Londonderry Center became Derry. And then the West Parish is what is currently Londonderry now, and that's why originally there was really no defined center. And probably when the rails came in, probably mid-1800s to late 1800s, it generated what is the business area of current Derry now, and then the original center took on the name of Eastderry. So there's an evolution there, but also what was happening in Londonderry, where the railroad came through, was was known as the business district, the village up in the north part of town, and that's where the thriving part was, because there was businesses there, people lived there. There's actually a high density of housing there before, you know, our current concept of zoning of residential, commercial, industrial was even developed. So you see a nice mixed use, which at times doesn't coexist too well, but that was the village at the time. And then as the railroad diminished and the automobile came over, that's with the spread and the sprawl of everything. Mm-hmm. So, and I think what people currently in what is, you know, probably the new Londonderry or Londonderry today is probably where the schools are, the police station and everything, and that kind of evolved. The common came. But originally, the churches were there, and Reverend Morrison's meeting house was the original town hall of what was, you know, Londonderry now. So there's been quite an evolving, and this is not to say that things are going to evolve further, but I think people, as John said, prefer to look at the center of Londonderry, where the common is, the churches are, the Grange Hall. Part of that is a historic district also, the schools and everything's together. Not probably the most pedestrian-friendly area or anything, but that's how people look at it now. And probably one of the biggest comments and input I get from people, that some like it, some don't like it. There's a lot in the middle, and they just want to be convinced. And what they say is they have concerns about the density, the impact of what the density will have on the rest of the town. Because I think this will eventually create its own village. It'll be separate from the town of Londonderry, but it'll be a village. I mean, governmental-wise, it could be still part of Londonderry, but also in the statutes, they could incorporate it as a separate village within the town of Londonderry. There's many of those that do exist in New Hampshire now, and they have specific governmental duties and everything. But what I'm finding as I start to walk some of that area, it's just I haven't really got the handle on it. It's the elephant, and I'm not comfortable. I got to be made comfortable. I think a lot of other people have to be made comfortable also. But one of the things I want to encourage people is to, if they can get out and walk that property, and kind of get some visualization in mind, if that's probably the thing to do. I mean, I've been on there. I haven't asked permission, so I pretty sure I asked permission to
You do.
to venture on there. But other people would like to walk on the area also, and if they, townspeople have permission to go and walk, not to cause any destruction or anything, but at least to take in the visual and what exists right now, and try to, look at what's proposed right now for the master plan, how things would, it's how things fit together. I think that's kind of my thing I'm grappling with, is how it all fits together, and not to cause a really not to cause a burden or an impact or loss of anything on the town of Londonderry. We want to make it Londonderry-like, which kind of the most Londonderry-like is the East Dairy.
I think in that vein, I think it might be easy to have open houses where people could come to the site and then walk the site, and we would know when people are on the property and when they're not. Some of the problems that we've been having is people think everything's abandoned. We've had a lot of dumping. We've hauled a number of dumpsters off the property right now. We've had hunters on the property that we've never had before. And so my concern would be, I wouldn't want people just to feel free to walk through the fields, and particularly children. I'd like to have days when, please come, view. We'll have people there. It'll be supervised. You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want. But it'd be supervised, and people would be able to help people if somebody fell down or something like that. I just wouldn't want somebody walking out of the property and having an issue or a medical issue and nobody there to attend to them. So I think that would probably be something that we could work with the board to schedule a series of events where people could walk the property.
I think that would be good, because it would allow the public to interact also with you.
And we could be there at the same
Be some
time.
very informal discussions, and because I think we need to, I think people out there need to talk with each other. They need to talk with us, and they need to talk with themselves, and they need to, generate, some commonality on what this is really going to be.
Mm-hmm. I've got a thought on that, but also an additional outreach there. The site does have a website now, woodmontcommons.com,
Okay.
with a lot of information on it.
It's now linked from the town's website as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was our request.
something we
so-
said we'd do. and-
We've sent
Yes.
emails out to all the abutters. We're going to have meetings with the abutters apart from these meetings. So it's very much an outreach process that's going to be ongoing throughout this, both formally and informally. Back to the point about walking the property, as a licensed land surveyor and professional engineer, I can tell you that 600 acres of land is a lot to try to take in.
Yes.
And
I'm overwhelmed. No,
I'm not surprised. I know I worked with some loggers up north who would say that a good man, a good logger, in a good day can try to get his arms around 100 acres of land. So I don't know if you want to devote a week walking around and educating yourself, but that's why if you have questions, ask Tim, ask me, and we can be more specific and zero in on what the issue might be. The land is remarkably consistent. It does have some wetlands. It does have a little bit of steep slopes, especially on the other side of 93, but those grades are all going to change. On the west side of 93, it's pretty consistent. So, it's been agriculture. It's been an orchard for a good long time, so it shows that.
Yes, yeah, that's some of our heritage there, or long before any of us here, but, present time, but.
I'm sure during this winter that you can expect, though, to see some cross-country skiers on the land. And I know people have just done it for years, so, I appreciate there's a change of ownership and everything else. So just, I don't know.
Harder to hurt yourself when you're cross-country skiing than with the snows out there and everything.
Right. I mean, and I'm sure they're, you know, going in pairs or letting people know where they are,
That's fine.
you know. I did go to your website and navigated around a little bit and made a comment on it. And I see how you're building, and I think it's gonna be good. And I appreciate, you had some links. There's other websites in town that you might wanna link it to as well.
All right.
Okay, and so I'll send that suggestion
Thank you.
forward, but, so I appreciate that you're trying to get the word out there and get people involved. I mean, I'm sure that the people you sent emails to let them know about the website were the people whose emails you gathered during the charrette.
Exactly, Mary. That's exactly right. And everybody that put in their email address received an email letting them know that this project, that this website is up. And we're hoping that starts the interaction. We've also identified, and some people have already asked to be a part of various committees, and we've started that process as well, and that outreach as well. So, again, we're in the baby steps of sneaking up on the elephant.
Excuse me.
Well, a little quick correction, John Michaels just told me the first email that's gone out didn't necessarily go out to all the abutters. It went to the people who signed in during the charrettes.
That's what we were just
So
talking
it's
about.
some of them, but not all of them. But other people who are not abutters as well.
John?
John Michaels, and what we're going to be we have an abutters list, and what we're going to be doing over the next month is sending letters to the abutter. We don't have the emails, so we're going to send and have meetings with them over the next month, but we have to send out letters for that.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Staff?
I just said one item. I'm going to escape out of the presentation here for a second. In the written part of the master plan, the new page that was added to the written portion talks about signage. And it says, except where otherwise modified here, the provisions of 311 of the zoning ordinance are incorporated by reference. I note it says more to come. The one provision I think needs to be taken into account. The majority of the land, if not all of the land on the west side of this project, currently has an underlying zoning of AR1. So unless there's modifications made to that particular section, you're not going to be having much signage as part of this particular package. So that is an area that would need to have some particular attention paid to as part of the signage part of this master plan, because otherwise, only the portion to the east side where it's currently industrially zoned are there really any provisions that take into account the type of signage requirements that are likely to be needed for this type of project. I'd also encourage them to look at creatively, particularly in the village center areas where there's concentrations of the walkable scale commercial development, to try to come up with some consistency and some design consistency in the signage amongst the tenants of the businesses. I've seen that. The one in particular that comes to mind for me is Plymouth, New Hampshire has a great downtown signage program where they have a particular style of sign that really identifies that as downtown Plymouth. I think there's a real opportunity to do something with that here as well.
Yeah, this was just a toe in the water.
I know. I figured that, but I just wanted to bring it up. But outside of that, really the only new information that's been provided to the staff at this point is the additional information relative to the firefighting and the signage, as well as the wetland topo map and the new key that Rick had presented in his presentation as well.
Okay.
So I'll go back to where we were.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, just a quick comment. The written part of the master plan, is that intended to be a living document, changing from meeting to meeting?
I intend for it to change based on us coming up with additional materials and your input, yes.
Could you highlight the changes?
Tim just said the only changes from last month are on page 14, where it's firefighting language and just the start of the signage language.
Right, and I took a look through it and I saw that, but as the document gets bigger, you'll probably be changing certain sections from month to month.
If it would help, I can turn track changes on, so anything that
Something like
changes.
that, just to help us navigate through what
Would
we've
you like
already
that?
seen before.
Sure.
Thank you.
And again, at this point, staff's looking at this as a template. There really isn't any meat to it yet, so I think that there's still a ways to go on that, but I think it's a good suggestion just to show the evolution of the document moving
Right.
forward. It's a good suggestion.
This is the skeleton. now we're adding to it.
Does the board have a sense of if a package like this, it's not there yet, but a package like this of the two things will do it? Do you think that will get us where we need to be in terms of a master plan?
At least from a staff perspective, what I've always envisioned is there being two major components: the plan portion, which would be the large-scale design drawings. Of course, we're electronic at this point, and then the document itself, which would be the written master plan, the written regulations and requirements. So, from my perspective, this is essentially what I was looking for and envisioned when the ordinance was developed.
Yeah, it's kind of like what my expectation was, you'd have the written part, but also you have the visuals and everything that really, both of them will complement each other,
And I just have a few questions on some of the things that were listed in the permitted uses,
Yes.
if I could.
Yep.
I just wondered what you might envision: assembly, testing, repair, and packing, or that kind of facility. What kind of things might they be assembling, packing, testing, and repairing?
That list is straight out of the PUD list of allowed uses, with the exception of truck terminals, which are also allowed, and it took a while for me to get out of there, but I got it out of there. But as an example, there are assembly operations that occur in what you would think was a single-family home of electronic components and that sort of thing, or small machine parts. So we should talk about if that sounds okay, if, earlier tonight there was a huge warehouse proposal that sort of building could have a lot of assembly going on. That's out of scale with a project like this, in my opinion. So, tell me where I'm wrong.
Okay, research and development, what do you imagine we might be researching and developing in Londonderry?
High tech, anything from circuit boards to software.
Medical.
Medical. Within a range, of course, but when I see components, I think high tech. I think of people working in an office type environment, doing light manufacturing and putting sticks in picks, which was an old Bell Lab phraseology for putting one component into another. I think that would be a good use for a high tech building. I also see, banking uses, doing software research, those types of scenarios in those particular areas that are designated for your higher rises and your office uses, and the light industrial uses in that type of component building. I think it would make sense to have those kinds of jobs, those high-end jobs that pay well in the area. So that would be a goal, to attract those types of developments here.
Those were the only two things that stuck out that I didn't completely understand.
So, Mr. Chairman, before you go to the public, just one further comment.
Yes.
In my position on the town council, I was speaking with the town manager today, and he expressed an interest in that. He hasn't been updated in some time and would like you guys to get in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, that's definitely part of the loop. Any of our legislative delegation, our state senator, they should be,
Yes, we've been talking with senators and state reps, but we need to do a little more outreach in that regard, according to what the town manager's saying. We need to be a little more inclusive in the loop, so we'll endeavor to do that.
Do you think council needs a presentation now or in a while?
Not at this time. I don't think that. I think what the council's looking at this point is they are, candidly, we are looking at the man who developed the ordinance to give us, good guidance on what this should look like. Okay. I think that's the council's position at this point, and they're waiting and watching, the process work its way out.
Okay.
Anything else from the board? I'm going to go to the public, and we're looking for the input. So feel free. Get the microphone up here. Just name and address. Let us know what's on your mind.
Just listening tonight, I guess.
I think you're kind of like us. It's kind of like listening and I call it discovery phase.
Mike,
Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Speltz, 18 Sugar Plum. If I can just give a quick primer to everybody about public access, because it came up here. Under New Hampshire law, if land is not posted, it is considered to be open to pedestrian access. So as far as I know, at least the land on the west side has not been posted. And so people have a right under state law to have pedestrian access for skiing, hiking, whatever. That state law also provides protections for the landowner in that if there is an accident on the property, unless the landowner is guilty of gross negligence, the state protects them from liability to a person who was taking advantage of the open nature of the land and got injured. I don't know what the status of the land was under the previous owner, but I'm sure it was in current use. There are different levels of current use. If you allow the land to stay open, if you don't post it, and it's in current use, you have a lower tax rate than if it's in current use, but you post it. So it could have been posted, you know, not allow people on it, but still been an orchard and still qualified for current use. It's a different and less favorable current use tax rate. So I would just caution you to find out what status you're in and then take the appropriate action if you want to make a change. So that's just kind of for the benefit of the applicant. I had one question on the narrative, and I think it occurs on page, let's see. So, sorry, wrong document.
Too much paper.
Page 5 of the Woodmont Commons Master Plan says that within E1 and W1, any use may change its location, so long as, et cetera. Then that actually is limited a little bit because on page 6 it says residential uses to remain, and basically that's the guarantee that on the outside of the property it will remain residential. So those two provisions are in conflict with each other right now. I suspect that the intent was for the more narrow limitation to limit the broad one, but in the future revision, I think it would be good to make that clear. It's any within E1 and W1, any use may change with an exception, you know, noted later on, if that is your intent.
Can you clarify that?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not disagreeing with what Mr. Spelt says with regards to access to land, but I think I heard something different from the landowner. What I heard is I keep throwing this change thing around, but what I heard is things have changed. We have people on the property dumping. We have possible vandals, and we have hunters on the land for the first time ever. So what I think I hear the landowner saying is, it's not what it used to be, so work with me so that I can make sure that none of these things affect you. I don't think hear him objecting to anybody going on the land, but I think what he's saying is I think we just need to be a little bit more careful because I'm not sure exactly what's going on and things have changed. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's what I thought I heard.
You're not. That's exactly right. I don't want somebody out there saying the pretty turkeys and somebody's got a shotgun and is beaming on them and shoots some people who thought the turkeys were pretty and by a mistake. So I'm just, that's just something that's coming up, and we've actually posted some security at times to keep people from bringing trash onto the property. So I just want to make people aware of it, that things are taking place and things are changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, at least some supervision, looking at the property and having, you know, like you people there for questions and answers will probably be more helpful, because when I've walked some of it, it's just kind of like, you know, it's, you know, all I can think of is nice orchard.
We do have people there on a regular basis. Some of the workers that worked on the farm are still there and will remain there. And we do have an office there, and we do have somebody there at least 4 to 5 hours a day. So if people want to just stop by and talk to Josh, who's the manager there, feel free to do so.
I'm getting the impression that perhaps you might want us to work with staff in coming out with a process of how to get through this approvals process. Is that a possible?
Yes. A big yes.
Streamline it, yeah.
Yes, because this is, there's so much here. I mean,
I sense you're facing a tidal wave, and you want to have it brought down the sluiceway a little bit so we can,
we got to break it into some bits and pieces, and
I still think getting together once a month is a great idea for both the public and yourselves, and just keep the dialogue open, and then continue to work with staff to build the framework.
Yeah, I think that's
And then
great.
just update once a month, because I think that would be a little more inclusive and would help not only the public, but the board itself
Right.
as to where we're at, and compare and contrast. We'll be able to ask questions.
And this
So-
is helpful to get your updates every so often, so, absolutely.
yeah, I think we got to have that personal touch, and I think townspeople want that also. It's-
I also see that as we're narrowing down, we're going to need more and more time, and we might need to dedicate time to, as we go along, I think we're going to find that we're going to need more time for review as well. So, it's a little overwhelming right now, and I understand that, but I think as we go through the winter here, I think the next couple of meetings will really start to define where we're going to be at, and we might need to dedicate a little more time to it.
Yes. Mary? Name and address, please.
Mary Tatro, 15 Isabella. Talking about the tidal wave of information, what I would really like to see is a plan where you say, in year 1, we're going to do this. In year 2, we're going to do this. In year 3, in year 10. First of all, right, in the first, how many years is it? You're not even going to do the eastern side, correct? How many years away is that?
At a minimum, 4 or 5.
So if you took just your scale, 4 or 5 years, right? So instead of showing people this huge, almost incomprehensible amount of development, you could just say, here we go. Like those diagrams of the human body, here's the heart, here's the lungs, this page, so that people won't be so scared.
I know, Mary, but I think because of the way the master plan PUD is written, they
Yeah.
have to show us the body, and then they can come in with the body parts. To go with your analogy.
There needs to be some direction and some understanding between the developer and the board as to where this is going before they can really start breaking this into a phasing schedule. The phasing schedule, as is noted in the key on the page you see here, is in progress, but it really needs a bit more development of the overall plan itself before we really get to the point where we can start presenting phasing of the project.
Right.
Well, Mary, I have to say, I was totally speechless after your comment on the body parts, and that's good, because I have a lot of concerns about this project, but I also see how it could be a really great and exciting thing. And people fear what they don't know. Nobody likes change. Although some of us liked the change in 2008, a lot of people are afraid of change. And there was...
Get that in, huh, Mary?
Well, I wanted to
come back up
represent
here
the
just to get
Democrats
that
in
in.
here. So
Hey, I'm a registered independent.
I'm loving it. So I think for PR purposes, as we go forward, and you have to scope out this whole giant project, but if you said, hey, let's talk about the elbow today.
Well, we will be talking about the elbow,
Well,
but
that's
first we have
good.
to have the body.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
So we get the skeleton developed.
So many places with this conversation right now.
Anyone else? We'll be doing this again and again. There'll be a lot of opportunity anyway, because email, send letters, buttonhole us when you see us. Jim, hey, you want to sit up here?
Back. Jim and Agnes, resident, long time. One question, very long.
Former chairman of the planning board.
We do have
We
an
don't
alternate
mention
position open.
Boston North made an agreement with the town of Londonderry and Derry to build 4A. And to my recollections, because it was a long time ago, that Londonderry was putting in 5 million, Derry was putting in 5 million, and they were taking care of the rest. Now that you bought Boston North, are you going to do that?
Number one, I didn't buy Boston North.
bought the land?
A person who's working with me bought Boston North, and all the rights happened to it. They're out of Boston. I know them, and they're working with me. And all the commitments remain in place. It's been reaffirmed in Derry, and there's been a legal, Tupper, I think, was their representative, and they accepted their obligations under the terms of the agreement. And I know that the town of Londonderry has agreed to, and knows that they are participating, and we are participating monetarily with it, and we're working with the state and the federal government to make sure that 4A is a reality. And that's where we're at. And
so you're not saying, are you going to foot the bill for the rest of it, or is the federal government or the state?
We're working with the state in that regard currently.
To help you out?
I don't think that anybody could build that currently. Back when this was originally proposed, it was a much smaller project, and it was a much smaller commitment. So, no, the commitment is not by this developer to fund it in its entirety.
That's the way it was sold to the town. The other thing was sold to the town, there would be no west access. So what does that do with the contract between Londonderry and the old Boston North if west side goes in? Because I believe town vote said, or discussion at that time, that there would be no access. Does that null and void our obligation?
I don't believe that it does. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into the legalese of it tonight.
Well, you don't have to answer it, because I'm not a lawyer, and that was a question I'd like answered from somebody that knows.
Thank you.
Second, these buildings, residential, commercial, what is the ratio of the buildings when you first erect them? Is it going to be 60% residential, 40% commercial, or what? Or haven't you any idea?
Oh, I have a framework, and we're working with this board to conduct that framework and to determine what those frameworks are, so that we can move ahead in a logical manner. We're very premature into the process right now, and that is a part of the discussion that's with this board and this developer.
Well, then that's a question later that could be answered, correct?
It'll be in the Phase 1 development
plans. It'll be in the Phase 1 development plans, absolutely right.
And these residential buildings, are some of them multifamily?
If you look at the buildings already proposed in the written portion of the master plan, you'll see that they're multifamily, single-family apartments, the whole range.
And how many units per dwelling, living units?
From 1 to an undetermined number.
How many?
1 to an undetermined number.
Are you going to exceed the zoning of Londonderry?
This process is creating a new zoning ordinance for this property.
I understand, but then it creates a box for us that another person comes in and put residential in. If you let them do it, why can't I do it?
Anybody can, if you've got enough land.
You understand what I'm saying?
Jim,
It's
a negotiation. We have to, they can't come in and say 48 units, and we can say, no.
I understand
It's a negotiation.
I'm just opening for thought. If you do, you got Pandora's box open, because everybody else will want to do it. Well, I'm putting a thought in their head not to do it, because I would not do it unless I do it for everybody.
But this is just part of the discussion that's going to go on, what's going to work.
I think you know what our behavior is like up here.
There are going to be some multifamily that will have commercial underneath?
I hope so.
And where does the people park when they use the commercial side?
On a parking space.
Across the street, you will have a parking garage or a parking area?
We might. That's all after this process.
Because I know Portsmouth, which you mentioned before, is building parking garages so they can park people.
Mr. Chairman, a point of order. Could Mr. Sinagnis direct his questions to the board, and then the board direct them to us, please?
Yeah.
Parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is probably conjecture at this point.
I'm asking you, are they going to have a parking garage? Now, you can ask them,
Yeah.
We've already conceptually shown it. We
Yeah,
did that.
I think
Conceptually.
I think there's some on there because of, you know, with the density, it could be like on-street parking, but there also could be, you know, parking garages. You know, it's one of the things I think we're trying to grapple with is one
I'm
with
not for this project, I'm not against it. I'm here to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm here for. The question is, you cannot change your zoning unless you know what's going to happen.
Well, this is what the discussion is
Correct?
going on now with the.
So
with
I'd like to see these questions asked
Mm-hmm.
and taken care of.
Yeah,
and
we probably can't take care of them today or
I just-
tonight, but, you know.
I just hear talking of a dream.
We're going to be, yeah, there's a lot of, you know, this is very early in the whole process, so.
Who is?
Yeah,
We are.
we
all
are. We
It's
all
zoning,
are.
Arthur, You're not new to zoning.
Well, PUDs, I'm trying to,
You shouldn't be new to ideas. You've been through how many?
been through a lot of them,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else? Marty?
After all this, I'd like to, Martin Srugas, 17 Wimbledon Drive. I thought maybe end this, hopefully, on a positive note. Looking around here, I see people mostly my age. And this project really is not geared toward people our age as much as we may think it is. It's really geared toward the younger folks. And what I'd like to see people is bring some folks in who are under 40 and let them experience this, let them see this, what this project is about. Because it's really geared toward the future, 20 years ahead. By the time this project is finished, as I said before, they're going to be taking my driver's license away. So I think, you know, we need to bring some younger people in
We
here.
have the building for it.
I think we got a little bit too many older people in here for this project, and I think we need to see a younger face.
My experience.
Hey, Jimmy, you want to get back up?
When I talk with people in their 20s, they all love it. You know, this is the thing, because I think the younger generation today and what's going to be in the future, or somewhat in the future anyway, are looking for, you know, a place where they can be very, very mobile, but not a big place, a place that someone else can take care of things around them, so they can just come, sleep, take off, do the things, but also they like around them, their friends. And that's why a lot of them are gravitating more toward into the cities, you know, urban situation. I mean, Somerville, Massachusetts used to be, you know, the pit of the state of Massachusetts.
They're going to write
But
letters.
now it's very, very upscale, and I mean, for the people who live there a long time, it's driven the rent sky high, but it's changed in like, you know, 20 years. So I think Marty has a lot to say, is that, you know, yes, we do think of it in our terms, but we've got to think about what's coming along and encourage younger people to get involved with this also, and what they want, so.
So, Mr. Chair, to that end, if people were to go to the planning board page on the town website, they could see the conceptual plans from November 10th, they could see the PowerPoint presentation from November 10th, they could see the written plan template from November 10th, they can see the planned unit development section of Londonderry's zoning ordinance, and they can see the developer's website, which has just opened up.
And tomorrow, the stuff that was submitted here tonight should be uploaded.
Should be up there, so there's lots of little places for them, for you to add all those things as we go along through this process, so people can follow along, and, you know, that would be wonderful if we had, you know, younger people that are gonna be here for 40 years, you know, come to the meetings and express their opinions.
Yes, yes.
And one last thing, Mr. Chairman, one thing I would like to request, and is that you contact Ron Campo, who's the president of LAFA. There are, right behind us, there are 1,400 children who participate in the LAFA baseball and softball programs. On any given time, there can be, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 people right behind us. If you could come in the spring and start reaching out to the community that way, to the people who don't read the newspaper and don't listen to these meetings and everything. These are the young families of this town. And, you know, maybe you can work something out with Mr. Campo that you can set something up near the snack stand there and start explaining to people what's happening. I mean, about 4 years ago, we did a survey trying to figure out how to do a small area master plan. So we went from bleacher to bleacher and asked, hey, what do you want to see at exit 5? It was amazing what we heard. But, you know, if you could work in that way where the community, it's just not this room, it's all of them. You know, the people that don't have the time, who are working 2 jobs, and hear what they have to say as we go through this process. I mean, that's really what I want to hear.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know.
Sure.
Mike?
And while Mike's coming up, if you did get in touch with him, there's also sign-ups in January and February and tryouts in March. So, I mean, that's another way to reach these people.
Incidentally, he's also the chairman of the school board, so.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mike Speltz, 18 Sugar Plum. Just 2 things, going from the general to specific. That the PUD ordinance says that the PUD master plan will take precedence over the underlying subdivision site plan regs. On the other hand, in areas where the PUD master plan doesn't address an issue, we then turn to those underlying subdivision site plan regs for guidance on what can be permitted and what can't be. So there's a tension there. You know, on one end of the spectrum, you could rewrite an entire set of site and subdivision regs and get it all in the master plan.
Not necessarily the site and subdivision regs, it would be the zoning.
And the zoning.
Yes.
On the other hand, you could, you know, go not much beyond this and then rely on the existing things, neither extreme of which is desirable. And I'm curious to know, both from the applicant, you know, what his intentions are and how specific to get in the master plan, how much to rely on the underlying regulations, and to hear from the planning board on what their expectations are. But to move this process along, I noticed that Tim has patiently left probably the most important slide up there for us all to contemplate. And I think it would be a useful objective to have the applicant and the staff come up with a schedule that they're going to bring those planning products forward. And it probably won't be in the order that they're on the screen, because some things depend on other things. But I'm trying to look for a way to move this process forward, and it seems like laying out that schedule in conjunction with some idea of how much specificity we're going to get into in the master plan would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Tim, is it fair to say, excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Is it fair to say that whatever zoning is determined in the master plan, the regulations that fall in that zoning are what will be, well, we will have to follow them, they come forward with their site
With the
plans?
site plans and subdivisions,
Right.
correct.
So once the zoning is decided for the area, Mike, that site and those site regulations have to be followed.
Correct.
No, I'm talking about Mike Speltz.
I know that.
An unfortunate thing, Mike. And neither one of us are helping Marty out with this program very much.
Marty said we were going home.
The words in the ordinance are, where specific development standards are neither stated nor implied in the PUD master plan.
But we would make sure that they are. The zoning would be in place for a specific area before well, as one member of the, let me stop there, you know, one member of the planning board, I would want to be sure that all of the zoning is clearly identified for whatever areas, so that there wouldn't be any ambiguity.
There has to be a lot of that taking place, again, because the majority of this land, the underlying zoning is AR1.
Right, but I'm saying we're
Absolutely.
I mean, we are planning to change the zoning
Absolutely.
because of the PUD.
But
I
it's
think
not-
I can help. I think I can help with your concern. This package of materials that you have, the plans are more evolved than the written portion. I had 1 or 2 meetings with Tim and John, but basically I had to come up with a framework that, interestingly, happens to fit with what Tim had in his mind for how to do this. But I wanted to get feedback from you folks before, you know, really getting into it and wordsmithing it. So, you know, we will be doing that. There is zero intention to pull the wool over anybody's eyes here. We want to, you know, Mike wants to build, and his partners want to build a really exemplar project, and I want to do everything I can to help. And I know staff is of the same mind. So there's no hidden agenda, there's no hide the ball. Everything is whatever it takes in terms of time and, getting it right. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the way this board feels, and I think that's the way people feel also. I think it's going to be evolutionary. I think we're going to have to work at it. We're going to have to negotiate. We're going to have to discuss. We're going to have to come up with something that's acceptable for everyone.
But at the end of the day, it's actually not, I think you're going to be surprised at the end of the process that it's really not that hard, because it's a rezoning. It's a more complicated rezoning than usual, but that's what this process is. It's not, getting all the details of a site plan
Right,
done
exactly.
correctly. We'll get there. That'll be the next step.
Right.
If I may finish up, Mary, the rest of that thing I was quoting says, where you don't have it in the PUD master plan, the most appropriate standards otherwise applicable from zoning ordinance, site plan regulations, subdivision regulations shall apply as determined by the planning board. So it isn't just zoning. It's not just the colored map with a list of uses that are permitted along with conditions. It's all of the things that are in your subdivision regs and your planning regs that talk about any number of things, from drainage to traffic to structures to setbacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just reminding the board that either the master plan will be quite lengthy and specific and complicated, or we will rely heavily on our existing regulations. And
That's a completely fair statement.
Right.
Yes.
That's why we wrote it that way.
Yeah, and as the operative of there is as determined by the planning board.
Right.
And I'm assuming that if it gets too convoluted in between going with our existing ordinance, the underlying district, and this, my guess is that the applicant will come back and revise the master plan to reflect whatever is going to go in that particular area.
Yes.
And I think doing a schedule to accomplish those things would move you along toward, being able to define that better.
And I think that's what you're going to do, working with Tim.
I think we're going to
working
get
with staff.
Andre?
And I think, like most of the planning initiatives that we've done over the last decade, there's always that attempt to have workshops to try to solicit input. And I think it's almost a wait and see and say, well, come up with something that we can shoot it down or pick it up, depending on what you come up with. So I think we're at that point where I think we got a lot of input from the charrettes and from the first meeting, or at least some input, but I think it's just a matter of sitting down and putting a little bit more meat to the bones, saying, I think this gives us a step towards creating the PUD. What do you think? And then having a little bit more something substantive to react to. But I think right now, in order to move this along, I think that's what we need to do.
Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
I may be able to answer some of your questions.
Name and address,
possibly. Jim
please.
Butler, 57 Mammoth Road. During the charrettes, the designer had indicated that a lot of the parking, unless this is going to change, but I thought that people felt comfortable with the designer's response to it. A lot of that parking is going to be hidden behind the buildings, is that correct? And is that something that is still your desire?
Parking is generally not in the front of buildings, correct?
All right, so I mean, I think, unless they change it, the designer had designed in that most of the parking was going to be behind the buildings, and that as far as a parking garage, that it was my understanding at that stage that there was one parking garage, and that was an agreement that was going to be made, I think, between the developer and the state, because we wanted to move, quote, a hotel up, and there was going to be a give and take there. So do you perceive several parking garages in this type of development?
I know that we've only talked about one currently,
that's
and
what I
that's on the southerly side. We've always anticipated it,
And that was for the bus facility.
that's correct.
The park and ride.
You know the question I
Yeah.
have?
So,
And all you have to do is read.
because I went to the charrette.
Just,
Thank you for answering it.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We didn't want to be here all night, Giannis.
I'm only the director of engineering for the town, so I think this is kind of important
this is
that
like
I might say something, you know?
I think they got 2 or 3 days for you.
I think it would take more than 3 to 4 days, you know, to discuss and develop this, but.
How about the short
what I
executive
wanted
summary?
what I wanted to stress, Art, that what Mike said, not you, but Mike said, I think is very important about analyzing and going and stressing each of these points that is right now on the slide, because that master plan could be 3 inches thick, but if you only identify, and you're going to make this very short in, say, 10 pages or whatever, now each site that will be brought up to the planning board might have then bunch of variances and waivers, because now each different setbacks could be applied. They don't know that yet, how they will apply this. So at what point, I think my question was, we will go into those details. If we don't, it's perfectly all right, and then what Mary's saying, yes, we will rely on the regulations that we have in place. But I envision that I don't think they want to follow those regulations, because they were already looking at changing the standards from drainage roads and everything else. So then if we do not address this in a master plan, then we will have to go through each site plan, and at what point you will ask for variances or waivers. I think that's what I think Mike was asking, if I understand correctly.
Just quickly to address the variance issue, it's not really built into this ordinance to have variances from the standards from a master plan. In order to vary from the standards of a master plan, you got to come back and redo the master plan. There really can't be a variance to something established as part of a PUD master plan. They would have to come back to the board to amend that plan before they would be able to move forward with something like that.
Okay.
So it should be
That's
then
when they
addressed in
design,
master plan.
that's why when they design a specific area and they say this area is gonna be commercial, that's all it's gonna be, is commercial, and everything
And
that's
that's where
underlying.
you develop the standards for that
Right.
particular area. We'll have these setbacks, these requirements,
Right.
these parking. That's, there's a lot of work still to be done on this.
Right.
There's-
Zoning, yeah. I mean, the master plan is just the really the very beginning of it. It's the,
It'll become its own zoning book, much like we have one for the town. There will be one for this.
yes.
For this master plan.
Oh, Jim, you can have the seat up here if you want, you know?
Arthur, you don't remember how late we used to be here. Relax.
I know, this is.
I only have one
getting young.
question, and I'll ask you so you can ask them. The Boston North property that they bought owns the Boston and Maine Railroad right away from their property to 28. Are they going to use that as an access?
I don't know
You
the
can ask
answer to it, but is there, I don't know who owns what anyway, so.
I believe that's in Derry.
well, no, actually, a portion of it is in Londonderry. The majority of it is in Derry. And Boston North, the Hyrax is the owner of that piece of property. And yes, they do have the rights to that. And yes, they do own it in fee simple. And they have, we have committed with them to ensure that that goes away and becomes a public right-of-way for the possibility of train or trails. And we've stated that at the charrette as well.
Because I think there was a train station or something.
And
in
we
that
have a train
upper end.
station designed and envisioned for it in the charrette master design. And so the answer is yes. So we do anticipate. I mean, it is a legal access right now. But if this master plan is successful, then it will go away. It'll become public. Because that was our commitment at the charrette.
A public street?
No, sir, no, you're not listening.
Public right-of-way.
You give the right-of-way back to the railroad?
Said train or trails?
I don't understand. You'd still own the right-of-way, because I believe you do, if you bought Boston North stuff.
I'm getting into a debate here that I don't want to get into.
Yeah, we went here to
It's
debate
not
anyway, Jim.
functional for this process tonight.
We're looking for.
So what's the answer, Arthur?
What I just said.
Yeah. I
The
think
answer is what he said, Jim, is that it will either be, if they decide to build a train, all right, a railroad from Manchester and utilize that bed, they would give it to them. If it's not going to be utilized for that purpose, then it will become trails. At no point did I hear that it's going to become a road.
Okay.
That's at least what I heard.
At this time.
Yeah, and even
At this time.
Because at the shred, it was envisioned, I think, as rail, because there's a train station and everything up in that part. Okay, anyone else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any other business to come before the board? Seeing no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
You already had one.
Already got it. Mary,
Second by
second by
George.
George. All in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank